Hell Let Loose has recently received an update that added the long-awaited British forces as well as new maps and modifications to gameplay mechanics that has some people up in arms. But from the general observation that I can see is that a lot of people are very upset about some of the things in this update, and let's start off with the British. I want to start off on a happy note and talk about what's great about this edition. First things first, I can't believe they make this the victory theme. I was expecting something patriotic like God Save the King or Rule Britannia, but it was a pleasant surprise that they went with this instead. Another great addition, I believe, is the Bri'sh Tanks, and that's to an extent. The Recon is the Daimler. I can't pronounce some of these very weird words, but it's an armored car that is much smaller in size compared to the other chunkier Recon tanks in the game. You've got the Tetrak light tank, and honestly, this might beat the Stuart in my favorite light tank in the game, because the selling point of this tank is that its turn speed is so good. Especially in 4th gear, it can practically turn on the spot, and to top it off, it has fantastic speed and acceleration. The downside, similar to the T-70, is that it lacks a hull machine gun, which might not seem like a deal breaker, but when the time comes to have one, you'll be thankful, and thankfully the vision or viewport isn't as obstructed compared to other tanks for the driver. Now, the Cromwell is a little disappointing. For starters, it has a similar, if not the same speed as the M4 Sherman, which is disappointing because the selling point of the Cromwell real life is the incredible speed that it has. And to top it off, it turns like a truck. I probably don't know if you can attribute this to real world statistics, but it's painful to play compared to the other mediums in my opinion. But the tank does have a nice low profile, and also the paint job, which all the tanks on the desert map now have, they include desert camo. The stickers or icons on the Cromwell's paint job doesn't look like it fits in. I know that there's a historical real world tank at Bovington with the same paint job, but they could have added some wear to it to make it look like it fits in better to the African setting, but honestly, that's just nitpicking. Now, the heavy tank, that being the Firefly, isn't that bad. Speed and handling as a driver is pretty frustrating because it does handle like a truck, but thankfully the map of LL Main, you won't be doing too much driving. But a real nice thing about the Firefly from my testing is that it has a 6-second reload, which is on par with the Panther and other medium tanks. You do get a nice amount of each ammo, which I actually did run out of on LL Main because it is literally a wet dream come true for tankers. It beats Kursk out of the water because I'd say Kursk is a heavy tank focused map, but I was able to get the 75 kills in 1 life achievement by just sitting in one spot the whole map and absolutely obliterating the enemy uncontested. We still lost the map, but in hindsight, I believe we could have probably pushed into the point a little earlier, but we ran out of ammo despite going full force into the enemy, and we still lost. But the Firefly looks great. It has a nice reload, but do expect it to handle a little less favorably compared to other heavy tanks. Now, I will bring up historical accuracy. I know some people don't care, and to others, it's a deal breaker. To me, as long as it isn't battlefield levels are bad, I'm not going to boycott the game over it, but I will give you a couple of fun facts here and there. And if we look at the North African campaign, Tigers didn't engage in combat till late 1942, and we know this because the Tiger 131 was captured and is currently the only remaining authentic and functioning Tiger tank in the world. There were no Panthers or Fireflies, but the Churchill was there, and it's actually what disabled the Tiger 131, but there's also a modeled Churchill turret in game that is the top tier, highest level upgraded bunker that the engineers for the British can build. From my research, the Tetrak was ruled out of being used in the North African campaign, but the Crusader, which is a cruiser tank, was seen and could have been made for a nicer replacement compared to the Tetrak. Also, the Matilda saw a fair amount of use in North Africa, and it did pose a bit of a threat to German armor since at one point they were mostly using Panzer 2s and 3s, but if you were to implement these things in Hell Let Loose, it could cause some balancing problems, but I wouldn't mind them locking certain tanks depending on the map, such as the map of Stalingrad. The Panther wasn't used and they could remove it from the game, forcing the Germans to use the inferior Tiger. But yes, this is such a minor thing and there are currently more important things that the devs should be tackling. But now moving on to the more controversial stuff, and that is the weapon loadouts and weapons themselves. The one thing I was most looking forward to in the whole update was the Lee Enfield. The big selling point of it is that it has 10 rounds and a fast as fuck bolt, but it seems like they intentionally slowed down the animation. I don't know if this was done for game balance, which I find stupid because the British don't get a semi-automatic rifle. Heck, there's a thing called the Lee Enfield Mad Minute, and I went into this update expecting to slam rounds into the Germans in this fashion, but thankfully compared to other bolt actions, this does have a quick ADS time, but you do get paired with a slow reload. The iron sights on most of the weapons are pretty atrocious. If you've used the MAZ 49 in RS2, I'd say it's on par with that, and especially the Bren gun, that was done so dirty, it's near unusable in my opinion to use. For starters, they've modeled the bipod that can't be used. If you try to shoot and strafe, you can't see anything, and even if you do stand still, it's incredibly hard to see anything. Compared to the BAR, which also should have a bipod, that at least is able to be effectively used without one because your whole vision isn't obstructed. And I find it kind of funny that in one of 83's videos, which God rest that game's souls, as well as I feel absolutely terrible for the developers, but from the little video that they showed us, they've able to actually model in the Bren gun much better than what was done in Hell Let Loose, but stupid point. There are other things people are upset about, such as historical inaccuracies, such as the pattern 14 being prominently placed throughout the classes, despite seeing very limited use. This is also applied to the it's pronounced Lanchester, I hope, which was prominently used by the Navy, but not so much as the ground forces. The one gun that saw a fair amount of use is the Sten gun, but barely any classes get to use it, despite there being like 5 to 6 variants and millions of them being produced. From a gameplay perspective, while the iron sights are absolutely cooked, they do perform really well with a high capacity magazine and a great rate of fire. I definitely say this is a contender for being one of the best SMGs in game, but the British did use the M1928 Thompson with the Mafia style drum mag. They used it a fair amount in the war, and it would have been great if they implemented this. I am thankful they made the Piat the default unlock for the AT class. I assumed they'd make it the highest, so that was a sign of relief. The Piat is great because it has the fastest reload of all the rocket launchers in game, but I am disappointed by the lack of attention to detail that was given to this weapon. For those that don't know, it isn't a rocket propelled launcher or grenade, whatever you want to call it. It's spring launched, meaning there's no smoke trail or noise of a propellant. Moving on to the cosmetics, which is also another unfortunate thing, because not a single mustache in sight, which is very disappointing honestly, because that's such a British thing, having that beautiful mustache. And another thing they could have done if they wanted to go the extra mile is implemented different imperial forces, being they could have had an Australian skin or New Zealand or even an Indian skin with the turban, because these are all forces that actually saw service on behalf of the British in El Alamein. But cosmetics wise, which I know some people don't care about it, it's just a little disappointing we didn't get any desert camos, especially with the shorts. But I know some people might bring up the argument that it was all Black Matter. This is what Black Matter did and Team 17 are just publishing it, but Team 17 own the game. It's their property, it's their responsibility submitting this, and honestly, if they just got a couple of people that play tactical shooters to test it, then they would have said that there has to be some serious tweaks needing to be done before it's published. It's like a group project. If the other half isn't pulling their weight and they're just producing shit, you don't submit it, you try to fix it, but you also tell the teacher or the community in this case that shit is sucked and you'd like an extension or something to be done, you don't submit shit and be surprised when you get shit back. I need to stress that I don't think the whole update is bad, it's just little analogy or some way that I could put it for you to understand. But hopefully over the coming months we do see more skins, more customization options, as well as a rework to the weapons themselves, especially in regards to the iron sights. But I will say that whoever was responsible for the sound design did a really good job. The Lewis and the Bren guns sound absolutely menacing, as well as the Lee Enfields also sound really good, so whoever was responsible for doing that, I really appreciate it. Now, 2 new maps have been added, the Desert of LL Main and the Dutch village of Driel, I hope that's how you pronounce it. Between the 2 maps, I love LL Main. Me being a tank main has absolutely nothing to do with it, but both maps are visually beautiful. I really like trying to hold what I assume are ancient ruins against a horde of Germans that have the high ground whilst trying not to get bombed myself, or even trying to cross a large open field just to ultimately be gunned down. Moral of the story, this map does have very large open areas, and if you try to cross it without making any attempt to flank around with a squad, you're going to have a bad time. Also, AT guns are a must on this map. This is actually the first time I've effectively gotten to use an AT gun, since you can practically overlook a whole massive area while showing very little of your gun, since there are lots of hills to perch up on. Driel, on the other hand, obviously has a massive bridge that can create some real butt-clenching moments, but thankfully you are able to flank around on the sides, admittingly at a reduced speed. I personally found the map to be the most enjoyable when it wasn't focused on the bridge. Flanking a point with a squad and hitting enemies' backlines was pretty fun, especially since there's lots of cover and places to hide. I was expecting it to be more like Remagen, but I'm thankful that it's not, and actually a fun map to play on. Apparently people are reporting FPS problems on the maps. With the specs I have, I was getting around 60 to 70, but I did encounter this weird rubber banding and stuttering every now and then. I don't know if that was my computer spazzing out, or if it was the update, or if it was just the server that I was playing on was less than desirable. Now, I want to move on to the one thing that people are very upset about, and that's also the thing I myself had advocated for, and that's an increase to run speed. It actually feels like the character runs with gusto and a purpose, and that his life actually means something to him. But a couple of reasons why people are upset includes Team 17 not effectively communicating this change before the update, and the other being, which I personally think is people being a little hysterical, and that is apparently the game is pretty much Battlefield with this run speed, and I just don't agree with that. Could they have communicated this change better? Yes, they could have, but from my research, this is apparently what it was like before update 8. Yet again, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm a veteran, which I'm absolutely not, and from my research, tanks also moved a lot quicker back then and were apparently a lot more fun. But people are complaining that this means you can be satcheled easier, and while that is true, I don't think it's game breaking, especially if you have self-awareness and just don't get yourself in a scenario where you could end up being satcheled, but doesn't matter, that's just my opinion. But a fair amount of people don't like the change, and you could compromise by making the current sprint limited, and that when you're tired you revert back to the old speed. It is a 15% increase for standing sprinting, and some people sort of want to compromise in the sense that you could move it down to 10%, but I feel like in this scenario no one can be satisfied. Update 8, they reduce the speed, people complained. They make the speed back to what it originally was, people complain. It's just going to be a never-ending thing, and I'm personally happy with the change. I'm not going to go back to what I said in my old video and say, oh, this is actually a bad change, because that's just not what I think. But these are the major changes to Hell Let Loose's recent update. Some of it is pretty good and a nice addition, but also some of it has been a little bit of a disappointment, and Team 17 really needs to sort of pick it up and step up and do a little bit better. But I do recommend that you check out my previous Hell Let Loose video, or maybe you might be interested in Burning Lands Vietnam, and if you are, please do check out the video that is on screen. Anyways, my name is Tan2, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.